You're listening to Counselors on the Couch, an open conversation between counselors, coaches, and specialists discussing how people just like you can solve a multitude of challenges. Counselors on the Couch is hosted by Dr. Chuck Carrington. We invite you now to join us on the couch to listen in as Dr. Chuck and his specialist guests and experts candidly share insider information on how they help solve the problems that drive people into counseling.
Welcome back to Shame, Abandonment, and the Pornography Trap. I'm Dr. Chuck. In today's episode, porn feels like relief until it becomes a prison. It deals with what relentlessly drives the porn habit. We're about to take a hard but compassionate look at pornography and how it becomes more than habit, why for many men it becomes a functional solution to an emotional problem. Not a good solution, not a safe one, certainly not a God-honoring one, but a deeply understandable one. We'll explore how pornography offers temporary refuge from shame and how paradoxically it ends up reinforcing the very shame it seeks to silence. We're going to talk about four things: the numbing function of porn, how it provides false intimacy without vulnerability, the way it links to identity collapse and moral confusion, and the critical difference between stopping behavior and restoring the broken self. So let's begin by naming the heartache, and that is how porn feels like relief until it becomes a prison. We often mislabel pornography as simply a lust issue or a matter of weak willpower. Some therapists will even call it a broken or defective character. In Christian counseling, they talk about it as a sin problem. But for many men, porn is not primarily about sexual arousal. It's about emotional escape. We've already discussed the shame spiral in affect theory, where we've learned that when a man is caught in the shame spiral, he'll often reach for a coping mechanism that distracts him from his self-awareness, interrupts painful emotion, gives immediate gratification, and lets him avoid relational vulnerabilities. Porn offers all of these. It provides control without complexity, stimulation without effort, fantasies without rejection, and solitude without exposure. It is emotionally and relatively safe, not because it fosters connection, but because it demands nothing of the man. No dialogue, no confessions, no unpredictability, and no shame from the outside. At least, not until it's discovered. It becomes, as some men have described to me, an emotional anesthetic. It lets them numb out. Not because they're obsessed with sex, but because they're exhausted by their internal shame. You see, porn mimics intimacy. It gives the illusion of being wanted, of being chosen, of being seen. It gives a false connection. But it requires no emotional presence whatsoever. There's no courage, there's no truth. The man is in full control. He can script any fantasy he wants. He determines the terms. This pseudo-intimacy is a counterfeit experience that bypasses all risk, all negotiation, all self-disclosures. It offers a one-sided gratification, but it also leaves the man more disconnected than before. In real relationships, intimacy requires vulnerability. You risk being misunderstood. You have to admit to your own weaknesses. And when you let someone see those parts of you that you've been trying to hide, you're risking that exposure. Porn promises the opposite. It promises satisfaction without taking any of those risks. It offers closeness without any exposures. But here's the catch. The more a man returns to porn to escape shame or to hide from exposure, the more emotionally unavailable he becomes to experience true intimacy. Remember this, intimacy is not about sex. Intimacy is about knowing and being known with other people. And over time, this reinforces a dangerous belief. that real people cannot be trusted, and that I'm too broken to be loved. So he returns to the one place where he feels temporarily in control, and that is pornography. But each return increases his emotional isolation. Once a man becomes reliant upon porn as a coping strategy, he begins to experience not only the original shame that led him there, but now the additional shame of using it. This is what I mean by shame upon shame. He feels shame about being ashamed. He feels guilt before God. He hides it from his spouse and his community. He lives in secrecy and duplicity. He fears being found out. This becomes a shame spiral in Nathanson's terms. I feel ashamed that I feel ashamed. I use porn to escape that feeling, but then I feel more ashamed for using porn. And because he cannot talk about it, he copes again by going back to it. This is no longer about lust. This is about emotional desperation. Men describe this to me in counseling as a cycle. And we actually track this cycle in our repair process. I have a process that I use for men that's highly successful, and it's based on what's generally called an offense cycle or an addiction cycle. It's a methodology from behavioral modification. But here's what the men are describing in basic form. There's an emotional trigger where stress is activated, usually by an external trigger, but it is connected to something that they're already predestined to be sensitive to. It activates shame. I'm a failure. I can't let anybody see this. Or maybe I'm unlovable. There's some sort of mental construct that's already present that gets activated, and that's their shame. The third is coping responses. They use porn for distraction, relief, or control. Some men use anger. Some men use alcohol. Some men use drugs. But we're talking porn in our context for this series. The fourth is after using the coping response of porn is the post-use shame. After the using of the porn for coping response, you feel more shame. That's the shame upon shame. We would call this guilt, self-contempt, and also the fear of being exposed. So they go to the next step. Number 5 is to vow to stop. I call this a false promise to reform. It's a false promise because it's not real. You're not really going to stop. But you promise yourself you're going to stop, or you promise God you're going to stop, or you do a prayer saying, God, if you'll take this away from me, I'll do thus and such. Or you promise yourself this was the last time, it'll never happen again kind of thing. And you make this promise because it makes the shame or the guilt go away. It lifts that shame off of you temporarily. It's a false promise, but it's a self-punishment. It's an acknowledgement you've done wrong. Sometimes you will punish yourself by blocking that website or putting yourself on a cell phone fast or something, or you'll increase your willpower. But these false promises are only there to make the guilt and shame go away. And by making a false promise and making that shame or guilt go away, you go back to being relaxed. And so you take your eyes off the goal, and that is to actually make a change. And it's when you're relaxed, or like I like to say, comfortable, you're vulnerable to being triggered again, because you haven't really solved anything. You've just kicked the can down the road. And so the next step, number 6 in the cycle, is a repetition. Another trigger and another cycle starts. So you're triggered, you're activated, you cope, you feel shame, you promise, you get relaxed and re-triggered. The result isn't just a habit, it's a system of emotional survival. And this system always collapses as a relapse under the weight of accumulative shame, because the more you do it, the more you're triggered. The more you're triggered, the more you do it. Over time, pornography doesn't just affect behavior, it fragments the identity. A man begins to split. One part of him wants integrity, love, and righteousness. This is the part we all want. This is the man that we grew up believing we would be. This is the man we're called to be. This is the man we pretend to be. And people say, well, how do I know who I really am? Well, who is it that you pretend to be? The man you pretend to be is the man you want to be. The man you want to be is the core person that you hope to be. Well, that's really what you're called to be. But there's the other part, the part that hides, the part that copes, the part that lies, the part that isolates. That's the man who's driven by shame. That's the wounded man. That's the potential man that's been beaten up and scarred so badly that you can't identify who he was to begin with. This fragmentation is deeply spiritual. If we look at the Bible, in the book of James, chapter 1, verse 8, it speaks of a double-minded man being unstable in his ways. You can't be stable if you're two-minded about things. The fragmented man is unstable. In Romans chapter 7, it gives voice to the inner war in this way. It says, what I want to do, I do not do, and what I hate, I do. When Paul wrote that, he was talking about himself personally. When a man lives this split long enough, he begins to doubt his own goodness. He questions his masculinity. He questions his moral standing. He even questions his faith. He asks himself these existential questions like, am I a good man? Does God still love me? Am I disqualified from leadership, maybe as a husband, or as a leader in the church, or even the leader of his own life? Maybe I'm just so broken I'm beyond repair. That's self-abandonment, and that leads to despair. And despair drives that shame spiral even deeper. And not every man is going to be in a situation where he'll lose his marriage. But shame will drive you to lose yourself, regardless. In earlier episodes, we introduced the idea of self-abandonment. When a man flees his own emotional wounds, disconnects from his internal reality, and chooses coping over honesty. Porn is often the primary vehicle for this abandonment in our modern culture. Instead of grieving, he escapes to the porn because it really distracts him. Instead of reaching for help, he isolates because he can get what he thinks he needs without any real connection. Instead of telling the truth, he performs. He goes to the performative nature. He does the things that makes it look like he's doing well, while on the inside, he's actually vacant. Instead of asking God to meet him in his weakness, he medicates his weakness away by distracting himself. He does not face his shame, he hides from it. And with each cycle of hiding, he loses a little more access to the part of him that longs for healing. This is why pornography recovery is not just about quitting porn. It's about recovering the man who got lost behind the mask. So many programs are about behavior modification, about trying to control the sin nature, about shaming the guy and saying you're a bad character and you have to learn to behave. It's about making him feel defective and telling him he's a bad person. And that's why it won't work, because it doubles down on the shame and it focuses on what's wrong with him instead of what's wrong with what was done to him or what he's learned and the mask that covers it up. The real work isn't breaking the habit. A habit is something that can just be stopped. You can stop doing anything by stopping it. But porn comes back because it's not just a habit. It's a coping strategy that's designed to stop the shame. And shame is not a habit. Shame is a belief. The way we deal with porn isn't about breaking the habit. It's about reversing the self-abandonment that led him there in the first place. And this requires some things. This requires emotional literacy. You have to learn to understand, interpret, and be able to relate to the emotions that are going on in your own body. You have to have some spiritual honesty What is at risk? What is happening? What does this mean? Why is this happening? You have to establish safe relationships. This is a hard one, especially for men. You have to be able to talk about what's going on inside of you with other people, and those other people have to be safe enough repositories of your confessions that you can trust them not to turn around and reactivate your shame. And of course, the only person you can do that with, besides maybe your mom, if you have a healthy mom, maybe your dad, that's less likely, is your wife. That's who you're counting on. But once you've hurt her with porn, that's probably not safe for you, at least not yet, not unless she's done her betrayal trauma work. Because what'll happen is she'll get activated in her trauma, and she'll say things to you that reactivate your shame, not because she's trying to punish you or hurt you, but because she's reacting to her pain. And more likely than not, your shame will reactivate, and the two of you go into a cycle, 2 cycles cycling together. I see this all the time. Because she can't hear your shame, she's hearing your behavior. She's triggering too. Your trigger triggers her trigger, and her trigger triggers your trigger, and you guys are spiraling out of control together. So you need safety in your relationship. I hear this all the time from guys. My wife wants me to be transparent with her, so I try to be transparent. She freaks out and starts yelling at me. Well, I'm not going to tell her anything anymore. Well, if you don't tell her anything, she's never going to get safe. But if you tell her and she's unsafe and she blows up at you, you're not safe to tell her. It's the chicken and the egg scenario. And then the last part that you need is the courage to stay present even in the pain. See, the problem is we get scared of the pain and we want to either back away from it or go around it. You have to stay in the pain long enough to get through it. Because once you get through the pain, you realize it's not going to kill you. It's kind of like going to the dentist. I hate going to the dentist. I've had some really wicked, evil dentists in the past that put me through unnecessary pain. And so I don't go. I don't trust any dentist. But once you get in that dentist chair and they start working on you, you have to stay present and go through it, knowing that 1, it's going to end, and 2, it's a necessary pain to endure if you don't want a lifetime of pain. We don't enjoy it. We don't want to do it. But we sit there and endure it anyway. You have to go through some pains in life in order to make life better. This is one of them. The pain of building a relationship is worth it. It's like childbirth. No woman wants to go through childbirth, but they want that baby. So let's pause here and make a biblical connection, because one of the things that I mentioned a moment ago is spiritual honesty. When Adam sinned in the garden, what did he do? He hid himself. He recognized his shame in his sin. Okay, that's part of the cycle. When you use pornography to cover your shame, you're hiding from your shame and you're covering it up. That's where the false promise to reform comes in. He covered himself with leaves and he hid himself from God because he was afraid to be seen. So he recognized his sin, he covered himself, and he hid himself away from God. Shame introduced into the garden at that moment, and it introduced separation. But he didn't just separate from God, he separated from himself. So he had a crisis, an existential crisis. His self split. Pornography mirrors this pattern. It drives men into secrecy. It covers them with fig leaves of performance and control. It tells them, if you're seen, you'll be rejected. He didn't want to be rejected by God. So he hid himself, he covered himself with leaves, and then he used lies and deception and blame shift. You know, the first blame shift, we hear about blame shift all the time. The first blame shift was in the garden. When God asked Adam why he's hiding, God knew why he was hiding, but he asked Adam, why are you hiding? Adam didn't say, I ate the fruit, I sinned. He says, the woman, so he shifted to the woman, that you made me, so he shifted to God, gave me the fruit, and I ate it. He blame shifted to 2 different people, to God and to Eve, to take the burden off of him. That's called blame shifting. We've been blame shifting ever since. What did God do? He didn't reject Adam. He pursued him. He called out to him, "Where are you?" He did not mock Adam. He did not shame Adam. He invited honesty. He invited redemption. He asked him what had happened. He made an invitation. That same invitation is extended to all of you men today. Come out of hiding. God says, "I see you. I know you. I still love you." So I'm making that invitation to you too. Come out of hiding. Step into the light. I see you. I know you. I still love you. I understand what's going on. You don't have to hide. This can be redeemed. Understanding porn as a shame coping mechanism changes everything. This is not about you being unworthy. This is not about you being a bad person. This is about you having developed a coping strategy from shame that comes from somewhere else, and porn latched onto it. When we realize this changes everything, it reframes recovery from a moral failure to identity restoration. So here's 4 key essential takeaways for you. Shame must be renamed and reframed, not minimized, not excused, but also not weaponized. We must help you and other men see that shame is a human signal, not a death sentence. It's a warning light that's popping up on your dashboard. It's not an explosion. Behavior is not the whole story. Stopping porn doesn't fix the shame. In fact, when the coping mechanism is removed, the man often feels more vulnerable, not less vulnerable, and that's why the behavior-only approaches often fail. Telling you just to stop the porn doesn't fix anything, and so it makes you more anxious, and you're going to look for other coping strategies, or more likely, you're going to go back to the porn because your vulnerability now is exposed and you don't know what to do with it. Stopping the porn is not the answer. Fixing the shame is. We want to stop the porn too, don't get me wrong, but we want to fix the shame to stop the porn. You don't stop the porn to fix the shame. Number 3, men need safe relationships, not just accountability. You need accountability, and in our program, you have to have accountability partners. But accountability without empathy deepens shame. This is why we ask you not to use your wives as accountability partners, because when they're hurting, they can't give you empathy at the same time they're giving you accountability. Recovery thrives in connection, compassion, and truth-telling. You need all 3. Accountability partners need to understand the process you're going through. They need to understand the struggle you're going through, but they also need to hold you accountable and tell you the truth when you step out of line. So it's a special relationship, but it is a safe relationship, and you need to have that. We discussed that just a few minutes ago. And then number 4, there's a spiritual identity that must be rebuilt. Men must rediscover that they are not the sum of their struggles. They are not disqualified from the love of God or the love of others or even the love of themselves. They are still beloved sons of God being called back into life. You may have strayed a long ways, but like the prodigal son, it doesn't matter how far you strayed, you're still a son and you're still welcome home. In the next episode, we're going to be exploring the self-abandonment loop, how men get trapped in patterns of fleeing from their own emotional pain, and how that loop is reinforced by trauma, disconnection, and relational failure. We'll also offer you a path out. But I want you to remember, you are not your shame, you are not your coping, and you are invited to healing today. Thanks for listening to Shame, Self-Abandonment, and the Pornography Trap. I'm Dr. Chuck, and I'll see you next time. Have a blessed week.